Hey, everybody. Welcome.
Hi.
Welcome to the Freedom Alchemist podcast, episode 2.
Woo!
I'm Paul Green.
I'm Kate Austin. And we love talking about all things freedom. And sometimes they're pretty obvious conversations that you can take into your life immediately. And sometimes they're a little obscure. And today might be one of those.
Obscure. Yeah.
Just a little like, So today we're going to talk about our birthing story.
Her birthing story. I mean, I was there.
Yeah, it was ours.
Well, it's a crazy time because we dropped Austin off for his second day of school today. Mm-hmm. And it's a big milestone. He's 3 and a little bit. In December, he was 3. And it's just been like, man, it's just gone so fast. Mm-hmm. And just watching this little spirit grow up. And I think you did really good for a first day of dropping a key.
He was just like, see ya. Like, I was like, hi, do you want to say goodbye? He's so independent. He's so like in the moment. And he's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. That boy is.
I was like, okay.
I know. The teachers were like, how's it going to be? How's the transition going to be? Is there going to be a lot of tears? And we're like, I don't think so.
No. He did say last night, though, he's like, I missed you.
No.
Yeah. He's like, I thought you were coming. Why can't you be my teacher?
Oh. His teachers are great.
Yeah, they're amazing. So we wanted to share this, and this is like in no way to give any advice. This was just our story and our experience.
Birthing.
And it was unique because we did it half in the normal Western medical system and half in the midwifery system. And so I feel like there was this great perspective because I was in both of them, and you'll understand like how in both of them I was by the end of this. But I guess we want to start with like the perceived concept of birth because of Hollywood movies is horrendous. Horrendous. Like, screaming, everyone's rushing and racing, and then like the baby comes out in 30 seconds. And that is so far from the truth. Like the minute your water breaks, you got plenty of time. Every now and then someone doesn't, but it's like very rare. Usually it's like a long time. And then this whole thing of like all the screaming and all the agony and all the pain. Yes, of course, it is a initiation in the most profound way. But for centuries, that's not how women gave birth. You know,
right.
They didn't like make it this whole dramatic, horrific, terrifying thing. And there's so many women going into birth that are terrified because that is all we see on television. Like, because it makes great television, right?
Yeah.
Someone's just zen, or like, you know, there's ecstatic birthing where people are having an orgasm while they're birthing and it's literally amazing and they're laughing and they're like in pleasure. Like that is a possibility, but most people don't know about that. So it's like that maybe would make great television, that last one. But for the most part, if you're zen and it doesn't make great TV. So like we levitate towards the drama and the fear and the scariness. And unfortunately, that infiltrates our mind, and what we see, we believe, and we actually gravitate towards. And so much of what we talk about and what I love, particularly, I have my master's in NLP, so the way our mind perceives and the opinions we take on, or the visualizations that we recognize from our inputs, whether that's books or podcasts or TV or family, friends, things like that. Our influences really create what we believe. And so having different perspectives can shift that in a really profound way, and you can have an outcome that you truly want to have if you can prime your mind towards that. Now, I want to put a caveat in this because we got a very different experience to what we wanted, and that's why we wanted to talk about this. So, should we start from the start.
Well, some of you are going to be listening to this later. We're live streaming, but we'll be publishing the audio portion of this a little bit later. So if you're listening to this, you can subscribe and you can follow along on the Freedom Alchemist. The podcast will be actually over on Apple iTunes, and then we're on YouTube as well as Facebook and Instagram, and we're going to be consistently every week sharing a topic that relates back to freedom and in this underneath the umbrella of what Kate and I do, which is like we're freedom junkies ourselves, but we also find ways to help our clients create freedom. An alchemist is somebody who turns something of lesser value into something of greater value. And so our heart is that you'll have some tools and strategies to not just be a victim to your circumstances. And when things feel like they're out of your control, what's some things you can do that actually give you freedom and power in those situations.
In the moment. So it's like having a tool belt where you can be like, oh, need this wrench right now. Like, let's do this. Like,
here's one.
Really just being able to pull these things out as a natural way of your being so that whatever is thrown at you, you're able to navigate it in a much more profound way, that it doesn't become this, oh my God, my life is over. You're like, oh, okay, wow, let's do this. Let's do this. Let's look at it this way. Let's look for the lesson, all these sorts of things. So we really want to, like, freedom is in here. It's not an external thing. It's really in here. So if you can have your mind be a garden that you tend to and you love on rather than a place of fear, and then you're winning at life in so many ways, and you can navigate from any horrific situation into something beautiful. Like if this one of the books that we love, which is Man's Search for Meaning, right? Mm-hmm. And he, talks about Auschwitz and being that, and then what he created for him, his life after that. Like, you can't imagine that level of horror and trauma, and he created so much beautiful things out of it. So no matter your circumstances, what can you create from that, with that? And so that's what we're really passionate about. And birth and death are both two areas where the garden of the mind gets a lot of fear and a lot of weeds. And so if you can tend to the garden of your mind, which is a really powerful thing, to actually have the awareness that the fear is this weed, and it's such a lack of freedom around birth and death. And it's like, so how do you bring power and freedom to those two things? And conversations. Yeah. And I think this story here too, like that Kate's going to share just real quick. This is going to be about a 30-minute conversation about our we have to pick We're trying. We have to pick up our time. We chatter, so I don't know. I'm going to let you but going back further, so my older son Oliver started out, it was like a home birth, and it ended up being in a birthing center of a hospital. So it was also a natural birth with a midwife. 21 years later, we have ours. And I want to something that you just spoke about, which I think is so important to bring up, is that for centuries, births and deaths happened in the family home. They always happen in the family home. Mm-hmm. And so everyone in the family, whether you're grandfather, grandmother, the children, it didn't matter. You witnessed life coming into the world. Yeah. And you also witness life exiting the world. Right. And it was just what was done. And so there was, I want to say, this tenuous, like, visceral impact of what it is to be born and the miracle it is of birth. And then, like, how gorgeous and glorious death can be as well. Heartbreaking, like destroying, and beautiful. And I think when people died in the home, it was shrouded with a lot of love and a lot of connection and a lot of, that was just different, right? Now, we're not talking about death in this one, although I think that's a great thing to talk about in the future. But birth, like like witnessing a life coming in and that was just what was done. And then there was these elders that would be brought in if there was a problem or something else that was going on, and they knew these ancient ways of helping babies get born. And we're in an era now where C-sections are just becoming the norm. And what are the implications of that? Now, this is nothing against C-sections, because I ended up having to have one. And so I used to have a lot of stigma around it, and I'll get into that
and judgment
as well.
even. Yeah.
And I'll get into that. But to really, is it necessary to have these, and do people know there are alternatives? So this is really why we wanted to have this conversation, because there needs to be a freedom around birthing and conversations around birthing, because it was a conversation that was had to us that shifted us again. So should we, now that we've teased enough, should we get into it, or is there any?
Yeah, no. Let's absolutely. Let's. I mean, do we go back to when you gave me the little koala in Vancouver, and that? Do you want?
Well, yeah, I guess.
I don't think you've shared that.
No. So another thing that I think women should talk about more is, miscarriage. So I discovered I was pregnant when I had just left Paul. He was shooting, I think, the show or a movie. He was shooting something at the time. And I went to Australia, and I was there for quite a while. And that's when I sort of was like, oh, I think I'm pregnant. But I didn't want to call him and say it there. And so I waited, and I did the test and all that sort of stuff. And I found out literally just before I came home. I was sure that I was, but I literally found out in my mother's home. Didn't tell my mother either. What? I don't know. I was like,
you
just
didn't?
kept it. I wanted to tell you first.
Oh my goodness. I was shooting When Calls a Heart, right? In Vancouver?
I think so. But yeah, so I was just about to get on a plane and go back to you, so I wanted you to be the first to hear it before I told everyone else. And so at the airport, I bought this little koala that had the little baby koala there, and I gave it to him with a card, and I told him in a card while I was watching him read it. So that's sort of how the first one went. But I had this full schedule of I had been already traveling for a month, and then I was back in Vancouver for this however many days, and then I was flying back to LA for one day, and then I was flying to Mexico because I was doing a breath work, a Joe Dispenza meditation.
Very intense.
Very, very intense Joe Dispenza meditation retreat, in which that's when COVID started going around, and everyone there got very sick. It was a whole thing. It was a whole story. Anyway,
probably when COVID was. I don't know if we
it
can
was
say
the
that.
very beginning of all of that.
Yeah.
And then I came home, and then we just gotten our mountain home, and I was renovating. So I was not present at all to the fact that I was pregnant. Just
Cranking.
going ahead,
Katie
full
style.
speed ahead, Aussie style. Just let's just get everything done that we need to get done. And 3 months in, we went to get our scans, our first sort of thing. Ultrasound. And it didn't look normal. And do we want to go into it?
Sure. I was actually very afraid, because I had experienced at an ultrasound, seeing a previous relationship I was in, the baby had passed, and we discovered it on the ultrasound, and this was my fear going in.
And this was 5 months in, so it was a 5 month.
That was 5 months. Yeah, not yours. Yours
not
was
mine.
3.
Mine was 3, but
yeah, and so I was very I didn't realize that I was going to be nervous about seeing the ultrasound, but when I got in there, I was like, woof, it brought back what happened previously, several years prior. And sure enough, right there in the ultrasound was the exact same visual of a baby that had passed.
Well, she didn't say for sure in that moment. She was like, it doesn't look right. And I could tell Paul was like a bit starry-eyed. And then she's like, come back in a week and we'll see if anything's changed. And then we were like, okay, what are we creating? And what do we want here? And all of this. And we went into it. And then she was like, I'm sorry, this isn't your forever baby. When we went back a week later, and I remember being like, are you okay? Yeah. are you, because I have a very pragmatic way of looking at these things. And I believe that God, universe, whatever it is that you believe in, that if the cellular structure is not correct, then that's why these things happen, right? So many women blame themselves, berate themselves. Even I think the industry sometimes points fingers at women, but it's the amount of women that have had miscarriages is insane. It's a really normal thing, but we've made it this like, oh my God, like it's almost like the Hollywood movie again. We've made it like there's something wrong with the woman. There's something, and then like all of this fear. And I totally understand if you're someone that has been trying for a very, very long time and you get all your hopes up and then this comes crashing down.
Sure.
Devastating. I totally understand. So my pragmatic nature knew that this would be extra rough on Paul because he had experienced it before and maybe hadn't done the work around truly healing that experience. And so it's we weren't expecting to go down this trail and this path, were we? But what that was made me present to was that we needed to clear the energy of that trauma for Austin to come into the space. So it was almost like you re-experiencing that with me, someone that stands very strong. And like there was moments where Paul was like wanting to pull back and back away because it was sort of like that's what he did in his previous experience a little bit. And then I'm like no, we're gonna do this, we're gonna talk about this, we're gonna move through this, we're gonna heal, like all of that sort of stuff. So it was almost like we needed that experience to clear the space and the energy for Austin to come into existence. So, and then the interesting thing is like I call it falling pregnant. That's what we call it in Australia, but it's like getting pregnant. I don't know. I'm going to say falling pregnant because that's what I know. But yeah, basically.
I'm falling. I just fell pregnant. It just happened. I don't know how it happened, but I fell down.
The stork came, and what do you know? But it happened very quickly. It was actually our very first attempt on the first time.
Oh, right.
Which was wild to us, and we thought it was going to be years. And so then I just expected it to happen again, like fast, and it didn't. And then we only had this short space of time when you were here, and then Paul went off to film When Calls the Heart again, and that's when COVID was happening, and so we didn't see each other for 5 months. So we had this big sort of little, like a 5 or 7 month, 8 month gap in the middle.
There was no traveling during that time.
We couldn't see each other. And then
it's crazy.
It happened, a few months after he returned. But and then Austin.
That's how that works. I had to be in the same place.
Oh, really? But the storks, right? The stork came to visit
then somehow
me.
she fell pregnant again. Not sure how, but she somehow fell.
So anyway, yes, maybe this is a conversation another time about miscarriage and but the amount of women that were like, oh, I had one, I've had three, I've had 10,
much shame around it.
There really is, and it should be something that we all gather in and we huddle and we celebrate and we share our experiences and we really talk about the normalcy of it. because it's hidden and everyone's ashamed, and there should be zero shame around it. Anyway, so moving on to this pregnancy and the birth story. We're going to fast forward through the pregnancy. But yeah, okay. No, we're not going to fast forward because actually it's really important.
This might be a 2-part podcast.
Let me tell you.
How do you make freedom? How do you create freedom, no matter what your circumstances? That's the heart of the conversation, and on the backdrop of Kate's birthing story.
So really, we just went into it, and a friend had recently gotten pregnant and had a child and said, hey, we use this OBGYN, they're fantastic. So we're just like, great, let's take a recommendation and go along that. And so we just sort of fell into that and started doing the regular things that you do at the hospital and all the testing and all that sort of stuff. And then one of our friends had a conversation with us after, I think it was one of your birthday parties. He texted, it was a male, texted me and was like, hey, I seem like a really unlikely candidate to talk to you about this, but I just want to share that we had a home birth and it was the most extraordinary experience I've ever had in my life. And I just wanted you to know that, I don't know if you've thought about it, but I just wanted to bring it into your awareness. And it was so strange that it wasn't really in our awareness because of the way Ollie came into the world, but we were just going along. And I think so many people just go along with the norm, which is like you get an OBGYN, you do all your hospital visits, and then the baby comes out at the end of the hospital, right? That's just what people think of when they think of having a baby. But there's so many other ways to have a baby as long as it's legal in your state. Sometimes it's not legal to have a home birth, which is just crazy to me in this country of freedom. But anyway, so basically to not be able to have birth the most natural way it's been done for centuries in your state is a really strange concept to me. So anyway, but we won't go into that because that's a whole other topic. But yeah, so he offered us this and we were like, oh, and then he kind of shared
Who was it?
It was Rob.
Oh, right. I filmed. I took pictures at their home birth. Yeah. Well, the not the actual birth, but
afterwards.
Just after.
Yeah, right. And so we ended up interviewing a bunch of midwives and then making the jump. And then I had sort of written to my OBGYN and I said, listen, I've decided to move this way, but if anything happens, like if I end up needing to go into the hospital, I would love more than anything for you to be my person. And she was like, oh, I can't take that on legally. I'm not taking that on. And I was like, oh, how interesting. Like, I wonder why. But anyway, there's all sorts of laws and stuff like that. But she just would not be a part of that.
She's a hard no.
She was a hard no. So anyway, I wanted to share about the difference of when I went from the medical route to the midwifery route. And the main component was the humanization of this little child growing inside you and how they spoke. Like when I was at the hospital, there's like
and they were
like
poking,
just this poking and
then
like
Austin was covering his face and they were calling her geriatric.
Well, no. Yeah, well, that's the thing. Geriatric pregnancies? Are you kidding me?
40...
From 35, you are a geriatric pregnancy, which is like high risk, which is insanity. Some women give birth at 50. Like this is insanity to be called a geriatric. And if men gave birth, there's no way it would be called a geriatric birth. You better believe that. So come on, whoever's listening, let's get this changed because it is not okay. And it like terrifies women and makes them feel like horrible. But the hospital system does. They're like, and then we saw another doctor earlier in our piece that was all about C-sections, and we ended that relationship quickly because I was like, no, I'm not about that. But she was like, oh, you're a geriatric pregnancy, so I want you to come in for an ultrasound every 2 weeks. That's insane. And like there is so much research done on how it can actually harm your child to be doing ultrasounds like that all the time. And I want to like I'm not going to go into any of that because I would want to know all the facts first, but there is studies done on that. But I want to share my experience with Austin. We went the midwifery way, but just before we did one of our big scans that you go into, ultrasounds, and it was a special ultrasound place, not at the hospital. And the gentleman, this particular one, Paul couldn't be there. He was filming, I think. And the gentleman that was doing it started, like, he was going around, and then he started banging on my belly, like literally with the thing, banging my belly aggressively, because Austin was doing this. He was shying away from the ultrasound and like putting his arms in front of his face. Now, if that isn't indication that they don't like it or that it doesn't feel good or there's a problem, I don't know what is. And so this man was banging my belly with the camera to try and move his hands out of the way so he could get a good photo for me. And I'm like, I don't need a photo. Like, don't like, but I let it happen a little longer than I should have, and it really upset me afterwards because I'm a very well spoken. I speak up for myself a lot, especially when it comes into medical situations. Mm-hmm. But you're a little vulnerable when you're in this pregnancy thing. You feel like you don't want to do something wrong. Again, I think this stems back to women like thinking that it's their fault when things go wrong. And so I didn't speak up for myself fast enough. And that image will always haunt me of him like forcing his way to get a good photo for me. And that most people wouldn't even notice that this. And the only reason I noticed it was so aggressive and so horrible was because I'd started my midwifery journey. And the way they're like, hey, little buddy, we're just gonna put a little cold thing here and we're gonna listen. It's gonna sound a little loud. Like they would talk to him about what they were about to do when they put stethoscopes on, and like anything they did to maneuver him, they would talk to him about it. And like he was a real life human being. He wasn't a thing to poke and prod. And it was so nurturing and so beautiful that it was such a stark difference when I went for this particular scan and he was getting bashed to get a photo. And most people would be like, oh yeah, I need a photo. But it's like, no, you need to take care of the little one. And if he or she doesn't want to take a photo, then you move away. So yeah, that was just that experience, and that really solidified that I knew we were in the right place by going the midwifery. And it's not for everyone. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying our experience. But that nurturing, loving care of being taken care of in that way. Now, fast forward again, and we get to the time I'm supposed to be giving birth. Nothing's happening. And we're like, walk on the beach, do squats, like kind of like do all the things that they do.
Already laid.
Yeah, so it goes over the date and then keeps going over and over. And I'm like, this man is a Viking. So any child of his is going to be large, and I'm not the hugest person. So I was
tiny,
quite large. And he was just not budging, not wanting to come out, not even making any remote interest of coming out. And so 2 weeks on, in California, there's laws of like when you can give birth at home and when you can't and stuff like that. And so I had to go to another specialist that checked everything.
Like fluid levels.
Like all, just to make sure everything's okay in there. And he was like, fluid's a little low, but let's like come back in 4 days and hopefully you've had the baby by then. Not a big deal. 4 days passed, no baby, went back, and he's like, I'm so sorry, but you have to go to the hospital. Like your fluids are too low. And this was like the most devastating news for me because I was so sure I was going to have the home birth with the water. I'd been buying flowers for weeks. I had candles. I was like so sure I was going to have this birthing experience. even my midwife said, you need to consider the possibility of the hospital. And I was like, nope, not me. That's not happening. I'm not considering that. I'm not bringing that into my space. I'm just not doing it. And they were urging me to really think about it, and I refused. And it's interesting. When you walk along the beach, there's plenty. It's almost like everyone seems pregnant, or everyone has a new child, and you start talking to them all. It seems like pregnant people and new babies, like they talk. So we bumped into this couple, and it was almost like maybe an angel sent. You know, when you sometimes like angel messengers come and sent to you, and they talked about their story, and they're like, oh yeah, we wanted a home birth too, but we ended up in the hospital, and because she was, you know, he was a tall guy and she was this gorgeous little Latina girl, and I was like, and he's like, you know, I think he was a bit big or whatever, and I was like, but you're like much bigger than me, right? And they're like, you know, and so anyway, they told us about the story of how they had to, you know, went on all the Pitocin, all the things, got induced, and like, then did the what is it called? The thing that everybody gets that numbs out their whole legs.
What's it called?
My brain.
What is it called? Goes in your, like a spinal tap.
No. It's a specific name. Anyway, that's gonna totally come back to me in 2 seconds. Epidural, yes, epidural. So it's like everyone has an epidural these days because they get to a point where they're like, I'm tired, it's too much, but for me, an epidural, like there's nothing more unnatural than laying down, like to have a baby. Do we poop laying down? No, we don't. We like, if you want gravity to help you, you stand. Like that's really how babies should be born and how the body is designed to be, like allowing the gravity to help you. You don't lay down so it's convenient for the doctor, which is what laying down is. Anyway, so you lay down and then you lose all of your power there, but there's no pain. So that's the great part of it. So there's the epidural. So they had the epidural, and then that still didn't work, and so then they had to have a C-section. And they're like, if we had to do it all again, we would have just gone straight to the C. And I was like, well, that's not my story.
Yeah,
so, like,
yeah.
I was like still in this place, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so we have to go to the hospital. So one time I truly believe that we get the birth that we need, not the one that we want. And I want to caveat that in a minute, like as to that I had a really easy, beautiful pregnancy. So had I gotten the birth that I wanted as well, I might be an a-hole about it. Like, you know, like I think you have to.
Yeah, you might have been a little less compassionate or understanding of other people. Just do it this way. You know, I really believe that you have to go, like, you have to be initiated into motherhood. It can't just be this like easy breezy ride, and like, you know, I think it's just like this it's an initiation, and you need to be prepared to be like, how do you roll with things, like rather than being stuck and fixed. And so anyway, so that day, from driving from Malibu back home to pack our bags, which I didn't really have packed. Midwives have said have a bad pack. I really didn't, because I was like, that's not my story. So I really kind of had to pack, and Paul and I are terrible at packing lightly. And Paul, like, you should have seen the room. Let me tell you about the room in a minute. But Paul literally, like, we had all my birthing postcards up. Paul put like fairy lights and furs and like lambskin furs. And I think they got down on the lamps at a certain point. Like, it's a fire hazard.
We had lamps. We had like he turned it into this magical, like beautiful
RV
place.
We used to have this old hippie RV.
So that you can do that. You have license to sort of make things as beautiful as you want. Everyone would walk in and be like, "Whoa, what is happening in here?"
Playing the music like and
he had his guitar, he's singing away. So So anyway, that day as we're packing and getting ready, and I was sobbing. I was really, really like not prepared and not ready for this mentally. We went to my friend's place, and we got a really quick needles, like acupuncture. He's masterful and knew how to hit points that really bring it on very strongly. It's another way of like helping people get into labor. And so he did that, and that made a huge difference for my journey, because I went in there, and then I suddenly started, like, within hours things had changed and were already better, and it was because of what he did, not because of anything they did in there. But the thing that was amazing to me is I had to go because I had a low fluid levels, but not once did the hospital check my fluid levels. So I'm like, I don't get this.
Yeah.
And then I proceeded, I had to go on Pitocin and hadn't taken a single medication, nothing. I was super clean the whole pregnancy, so that was gutting and devastating.
Yeah.
I had to be hooked up to monitors. That was devastating because it was so far from like what it is to give birth at home.
Yeah.
And so that was all pretty devastating, but I was determined that I was still going to do it my way as much as I could. And so what that meant was I was left there on Pitocin. They tried to do a bunch of things that didn't work, and like they gave me a bunch of different things, but I went up to a level 10 of Pitocin, which is apparently very, very high. But nothing was really happening. My body was just stuck. And I labored for 3 days like that on all this Pitocin, like just, and on the last day they, broke the sac. And my doctor went home because it was her end of her shift. And for 12 hours, contractions are meant to be like they come on and they come off and they come on. I had a 12-hour contraction. It's literally like Austin's head was sitting on my pelvis. There was nowhere for him to go.
And Kate can take a lot
and
of
I'm
pain.
I'm a pain, like I can really meditate through pain. So nobody realized.
Her contractions didn't have like a stop.
There was just like a 12-hour contraction,
there was
basically.
That long?
Yeah, it went the whole night.
And then I was just standing next to her, like knees buckling, had to lay down. And like, I better get
having
some
little
sleep.
naps. And I also had a doula. So my doula was allowed in on the last night. She was there with me and just meditating with me and massaging and doing that sort of stuff, which was really beautiful.
And I would go sneak croissants and like mochas because it was COVID, so you couldn't really leave the hospital. So I would like sneak.
They just opened up, so you're allowed to leave.
I was allowed to leave and come back.
I wasn't allowed to leave.
But like everyone's in masks, and I went and got like these chocolate croissants from our favorite bakery and like a decaf mocha, so she could like have a little dippy do and have I would dip. She wouldn't dip. I'm a dipper.
So yes, so 12 hours in, and because I'm not a screamer, I'm not a complainer, I'm just a gritter.
Grit and bear it.
Yeah, I then was like, something is wrong. Somebody needs to come and check me. Can someone please come and check me? And so we had to request it, and it was at 4 a.m. or 3 a.m. or something. So
the nurse had to come.
The nurse came, and she's like, oh, you're only 3 centimeters dilated. So here's Austin, huge child, trying to squeeze through for 12 hours, 3 centimeters, like dilation, which is obviously never going to work, right? Which is why I was in a 12-hour contraction, because it was like that was bearing down on me with no fluid and no way to sort of navigate it. And so they're like, oh, well, do you want an epidural? And I was like, no, I don't. I was like, and I called my doctor. She picked up at 4 a.m. and I said, what are the chances of me being able to give birth the way I want to with an epidural? And she said, very small. I was like, well, why would I take all of those extra drugs and do that to myself if then I have to go and do a C-section? Because they were like the options left, because the fluid was out and there was like my body was not responding. And so I did the best I could in the 3 days. And the beautiful thing was, because my doctor gave me agency of my own body, most doctors would have hurried that. They're like, no, it's not happening. We're gonna do a C-section. We're gonna do this.
Yeah.
And most people listening would be like, hell yeah, I'd prefer to do that. Get me out of there. I don't want to labor for 3 days. So I get it. I totally get it. But for me, because I'm very strong, and because the way I wanted things was to do the best to have a natural birth as best as I could, it mattered to me that I got the agency of my body to labor for 3 days, even though it was induced on Pitocin and all that sort of stuff. It was still, I got to choose it with no painkillers whatsoever, just the Pitocin. And so then I got to make a powerful choice of like, okay, that we've run out of options. What matters now is that my baby is healthy, and I was exhausted as well. Like 3 days of laboring will do that to you. So I was like, okay, let's do it. Let's go. And then one of the nurses was like, oh, well, we have to wake up the surgeon. Like, we have to wake these people up. It's like a whole thing. And I was like, well, yeah, that's why I'm here. So you do what you need to do. Like, that's what's happening.
She was the only one that wasn't like a great vibe.
We had these beautiful, like all these visiting nurses,
a lot of visiting
traveling
nurses,
and they were angels.
The traveling nurses, but the ones that were residents were cranky bears.
Yeah, the residents were awful.
Well, no, she was.
Yeah, that one.
The other ones were great.
Yeah. So we had these mixture of really magical and like...
One makes the other one seem... how the traveling nurses were so sweet that it made the other ones just be like, whoa, what just happened? Like vibe shift. In here.
Yeah. And all of them were like, this is going to be the day. Like everyone got to know me because I was there for so long. So
I grew a beard in those 3 days.
People aren't usually in the birthing suite for 3 days, but they usually move to the other one pretty quickly. Anyway, but then what they made me do after laboring for 3 days, which was wild, is they didn't wheelchair me to the surgery. I was like bent over, exhausted, like shaking. By this stage, I'm shaking, but they made me walk to the theater, which I'm sure there's a reason. But it was fascinating because I was a mess. And then I refused all the narcotics that they normally like to give you. I got the spinal tap, which you have to because they're majorly cutting you open.
That was a hairy experience watching him inject you in the spine because there's just the in between the vertebrae, it's so delicate, and like they have to do their job so well. And the guy, the
anesthetist was the most magical human
so
ever.
Cool. He like had this great music playing when Austin entered the room,
and he was just like, "Yeah, guys,
we're doing it."
Yeah, and he was like,
he was a great vibe.
He was beautiful, which yeah.
Thank goodness.
Because my doctor had to. Yeah, it was at 5:07 was when he was brought into the world. But my doctor had to shush the nurse that was the problem because they were like bitching and saying nasty things like while the surgery was in place. So it was a whole interesting experience with that, like because my doctor was so beautiful, and it was like this contrast of really light, beautiful beings and really like some dark kind of energy of like, maybe she was just having a bad day. We don't know what was going on in her life that day, or like, and that misery is infectious, right? But I also, as I was in recovery, should we talk about Austin? Austin came out
covered in
covered in meconium because there was no.
He was in there so long and just pooping himself.
So he was like brown.
Chocolate. He was a chocolate baby.
Chocolate baby. And he was, with this blonde hair, like
so
long
wild.
blonde hair.
So vivid.
And, but it was extraordinary that he hadn't exasperated all. No, not once in those three. Aspirated.
He didn't breathe it in.
Not once in the 3 days did his heart rate go up. He was just chilling. He was just like, yeah, guys.
What's all this brown stuff?
Just hanging out here. Like, I'm comfy. I don't want to come out. So he wasn't in, which is why they didn't force me into a
he never
C-section.
Was
he didn't. His heart rate didn't go. He was like totally chill the whole time. It was just me. So they're like, nah, who cares about the mom? So I want to share this. And then after we got out, there was this woman that was like, oh, I wish they had told you about like how it's going to be for you because you didn't have the narcotics, because it's going to be much harder. You're going to really struggle.
Come on, give her an Aussie accent. Even though she's not Aussie, give her the Aussie accent. Give her the brutal Aussie accent.
And my doctor, again had to come and be like, hey, this is none of your business. This is her choice. Move away. But it's like, it's so interesting how ingrained people are about, like, I have no problem with pain. I think pain is a really powerful teacher and it shows me what I need to look at. So I'm willing to be with it.
You just knuckled through the pain after the spinal tap wore off, the incision and all your organs with them moving them around. No, most people are on some opiates to get them through the first
few days.
And you didn't?
No. I mean, I still had, I like rejected all of the heavier ones and I took the, like, they were pills, they were painkillers. I think it was
to help
essential.
on the incision.
But I was like trying to space them all out. I didn't want them because I didn't want my child to have that in his system when I'd been so clean the whole pregnancy. Because it does, if you have the narcotics.
Kate even stopped smoking for the whole pregnancy.
Babe, I have never smoked in my life. It's like at all. It's like this. I was a hard no.
Can you believe moms used to smoke
while they're pregnancy? Doctors used to tell them, just smoke, it'll make you feel better. Anyway, that's a whole nother story we could go into one day. But yeah, so it was this.
I was supposed to be at ChristmasCon. There's a bunch of messages on here that's like, we were with Ruth at ChristmasCon waiting to hear the news.
I know, and it went on and on for days.
Yeah. I remember.
So yeah, so we had, like, I would say a less than ideal birthing story.
But right off the bat, we can't say the word, but they tried to give us all. They actually right out the gate. We had to sign some things that we didn't want our newborn to have a bunch of needles. I can't say the word, and it was incredible how hard we had to fight for.
We were pretty good. But there are some people that ask for that form. Like there's a form you have to, because otherwise they can take your child and just do it without your permission. Yeah. There's a form you have to ask for when you go in. But I have heard in the past, especially with
it depends on your
demographics, certain demographics, that they have been.
They're called Child Protective Service if you don't subscribe to the schedule of needles at birth. And so we had to. It was interesting, like that they gave us a doctor,
and then the checklist from there too, where it's like, have you been circumcised? Like it's just a checklist of before you leave the hospital.
Yeah,
like there's.
It was wild. It was a wild experience.
And like the reason it was so wild is because I got so educated on childbirth and how natural and normal and beautiful it can be. And this was like the other end of that and how clinical it was and how they treat, like, oh, let's just whip off their foreskin, like without any like, oh, it's just a baby. They don't feel anything.
No ceremony, no music, anything. No candles.
Like, are you insane? Like, so it's just like there's this whole like medical way of perception that is so different to humanization of like what it is and how beautiful the birthing process is and how extraordinary like on so many levels for everyone involved, because we don't get to experience that because they're done but closed doors in hospitals and not with the whole family, like loving, because so many people, if they're calmed, if they feel safe, if they feel secure, which a lot of people do in their home when they're with all the people they love, the body opens. The body is like not in like, what's happening? What's happening? Like it's really hard for the body to open in a hospital environment when we've seen all these Hollywood movies of screaming. So it's like,
that's, you kind of get what you expect. But to wrap this up, what advice would you give to either a young mom or an older mom, geriatric mom?
And there's so many more geriatric moms happening. I will refuse to call 40s. It like mature women that like know how to
the prime of their life.
Yeah, the prime, exactly, and have the experience to give their children all sorts of magic, right?
And so they can have some freedom and some power around the birthing experience, even the pregnancy experience. What's some advice, like simple? We'll wrap it up with that.
I mean, I don't want to give advice because every single person is different, right?
Okay.
But what I do want people left with is there are more options about birth than you are led to believe about how you can birth, and it can be very empowering and very beautiful experience. I know ours doesn't sound like it, but the fact that I got to choose it. And one more thing that they don't talk about is on the other side, maybe because I labored for 3 days first and then I had the C-section, but on the other side, that is some, like, it is not, and like I was like, no, it's a cop out when people get C-sections.
Recovery.
That was my old belief, and I'm happy to say it because I had to go through it, and I'm like, maybe this is part of what I needed humility around. It is no joke. You are healing from a very significant surgery.
All your organs are pushed around.
All of your organs, and you have to
giant comes through a
care
2
for a
centimeter,
child.
3 centimeter incision.
And that child is going to have exposure to medications from such a young age. Anyway.
So how does the mom get freedom in a situation and power where it feels like there is none?
Yeah. I'm going to leave some resources of a ton of books that
we'll put that in here,
that can really help this journey of really understanding birth is such a empowering, beautiful thing. I think, so many people when they get pregnant are like, great, now I'm eating for 2, and they eat all the chips and the ice cream and all the things, and it's like, no. Like, how you eat is how your baby's brain development, how they are going to be. So nutrient dense, just eat real food. Good food. If God created it, then eat it. If it came from a package that man created, don't. Basically, like, that's how you're gonna have, this
lots of protein, lots of good fats for that little
like to really
there.
nurture this baby. And you're not eating for 2. Like, you only need like such an extra, like, minute amount.
It's not another
top.
Like adult in there.
No,
it's a baby.
No, and move your body like. It is a marathon. It can be a marathon to give
train
birth.
for it. There you go.
You train for it. Like, even if it's just walking every day, you want to be in a physical shape in order to make that birthing process as easy as possible.
Lift weights
and lifting weights and all of that, because you want to, the fitter and stronger you are prior to giving birth, the easier it's going to be on the other side, because so many women really struggle with the other side of that, because then you're caring for a child. How do you take care of yourself as well? So you want some muscle memory, and you want to have that set up. So my advice would be is to.
She's not giving advice, but
I'm not giving advice. I'm giving like broad strokes of recommendations to. It's just really look at the options that you have.
Yeah.
And
speak up.
And do not be fear-mongered into that there's all of this issues when you're giving birth after 35. Sure, there can be, but I know plenty of 35-year-olds that are much healthier than 20-year-olds. And you can reverse age everything in your body. That's something that we help people do all the time. So it's just like you can clear things up and clean things out and get your body into an extraordinary position. So don't focus on any of that stuff, because you will be feared into it. You can be like, women have given birth naturally up until 50. The cultures that have 12, 14 children, like, it's just normal. It's, so don't be fear-mongered into that. And we're going to leave some books and resources
just
at the bottom.
In the comment.
My favorite one, let me just show one favorite book that really changed my world.
And if which book have you got there?
And this is like from the beginning of the journey, just so good. It's Real Food for Pregnancy. We have no affiliation to this book. It's just something that really changed my world, and it talks about all stages of pregnancy and what's happening, and it debunks. It's the only super scientific book that debunks a lot of the myths that women have around pregnancy and around miscarriage and all these sorts of things.
Yeah, foods that don't build a healthy baby. There you go. That's really cool.
All of that sort of stuff. So it's really profound and really like such a Bible, and so I recommend it to anyone that's pregnant. But yeah, and Ina May she has a farm somewhere in America, and she's been doing natural birthing for like 40 years or something. And it's profound and powerful. And if you read her books, you get empowered about the good experiences. So yeah, there's a lot out there, and we'll leave some resources below here. But what we want to be left with is like the freedom of choice. Like, we so often are on autopilot and just go into like what is the norm, we are freedom junkies, even we fell into that trap. It's easy to fall into. And so we want you to like open up your limitless possibilities of what you can create.
And like remember to create, because when fear comes in, you often default to the expectations of others with higher authority, like a doctor. And so it's really important, let that even be a reminder for you when there's fear, to be like, hold on, let me just take a breath, slow down here. What do I want to create, rather than how should I respond? Like in moving out of responding to what other people think you should do, or your parents did, or your doctor thinks you should do, to just take a moment, take a breath, and go, what do I really want to create in this moment? And for us, the goal is always freedom and power and self-expression. But yeah. And so if you're watching this, thanks for sharing that, babe. There's so many places I want to go, because I would usually give people the Baby Wise book, and that's a book of let them cry it out. And being married to this one has been such a journey with like her psychology and her training with NLP and strategic coaching. She's like, I can't let this baby cry. Like I want, and like to understand, their right to belong. And so we can talk about that on another one. But as a man, and I had a child before, I could have come into it with just this like, nope, we're doing it this way. But I was open to being like, well, what does this baby need? Because he's so different than Oliver in so many different ways.
And that was just a book that was recommended to you that worked in
and I gave it to 20 dads, and they thanked me for giving them a good sleep schedule and great kids.
and now he's like, ooh,
no, it just was the right thing. So if it's the right thing, you'll know when you have a baby. It's like what's right for every. I don't think.
There's no one
Oliver
way.
never cried, so it's easy to let him cry it out when he never cried.
Well, yeah,
he wasn't
you
in the
would
other
have blocked
room.
it off if he did anyway. Paul blacks out anything that's like not positive.
It's not in the past. Yeah, it's true. Timmy asked, when will we upload this as a podcast? Yeah, so this is that we wanted to, for our own accountability, to make sure every week we get one of these episodes out, and every week we'll be dropping a new episode on our platforms like this with video, but also we have a podcast on Apple Store, and it's also on Spotify called The Freedom Alchemist. And it'll say with Paul Green and Kate Austin. It's got Kate on the front going like this. So please go there, subscribe, and give us, if you can, there's a Valentine's episode up already. And our whole point with this is to share the strategies and the tools that we've used in our programs to help our clients achieve this life that they really want, and by their design, and like lifestyle architects in a way. And we have, our website is freedom-alchemist.com, and you can see we have a couple offerings there. And if you find yourself stuck or like having no freedom, and you want to learn how to alchemize your circumstances, that they might look like they're the worst situation, and turn them into the best situation, that's sort of our zone of genius and our zone of fun for Kate and I. So no matter when you're seeing this is 2025 right now, but there'll be a little thingy down below that'll give you a way to connect with us or ask us some questions, or there'll be a way to see if it's a good fit for us to work at one of our levels. We have a couple different ways of working with people, but that's it.
All of them offer freedom. So that's what we're all about.
They're not free, but they're for freedom.
There are free things in there.
There is.
This podcast.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
All right, you guys. Thanks for stopping in, and make sure you share it or subscribe and all that good stuff. And we'll see you next week.
And is it on, where do they subscribe? To the podcast, Spotify?
Podcast is both Apple's on iTunes is the best, because you can leave reviews there and stars and subscribe there. Like you can actually join it, like it or whatever. And then also here you can subscribe to our YouTube channel to get notified when we do these live streams like this as well. And here on Instagram, you guys, you can turn on your notifications so you'll get chirped, which is annoying, but you'll get chirped when we go live. You'll have to deal with everyone else's chirping. Chirp. But right. All right, we'll see you all later.
Big love, guys.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.